There are entire stretches of geological time where life seems to flicker, then vanish, leaving behind silence instead of certainty. Layers of rock form, sediment accumulates, climates shift, and yet no bones appear. For decades, sometimes centuries, these absences are treated as endings. Names are written into extinction lists. Evolutionary trees are pruned. The narrative feels clean and resolved. But nature is rarely clean, and history is almost never resolved. The Earth does not preserve its past evenly. Time itself edits the story, tearing out pages, smudging others, and leaving behind fragments that can be misread as conclusions. A species may survive in small, isolated populations, far from the environments that favor fossilization. It may retreat into ecological corners where evidence decays faster than it can be preserved. Or, it may persist at numbers so low that detection becomes statistically unlikely, even over centuries. In these cases, extinction becomes less of a moment and more of an assumption. This phenomenon has a name. Paleontologists call it the Lazarus effect, when a species disappears from the fossil record for a significant span of time, only to reappear later as if resurrected. These ghost lineages reveal that survival and visibility are not the same thing. Life can continue quietly, unseen, while science waits for proof. The longer the gap, the stronger the illusion of finality becomes. Consider what it means for an animal to leave no trace for millions of years. That does not require total disappearance. It requires only that the survivors live where sediments do not preserve bones, where bodies are recycled by ecosystems instead of buried by chance. A population tucked into a mountainous refuge, a deep ocean trench, or a fragmented island chain may persist without ever touching the fossil record again. From the perspective of stone, they are gone. From the perspective of biology, they endure. Even in the modern world, where satellites scan forests and oceans are crossed by research vessels, absence is still not proof. Vast regions of the planet remain poorly explored. New species are described every year, some large, some elusive, some hiding in plain sight. If discovery is still ongoing, extinction must be interpreted with caution. This uncertainty grows even sharper when humans enter the picture. Many species declared extinct in historical times were judged so based on silence rather than evidence. No confirmed sightings, no remains, no calls heard. But silence can be deceptive. Animals alter behavior under pressure. They become nocturnal. They retreat deeper. They fragment into smaller groups. A population that once dominated a landscape can become nearly invisible without ever truly disappearing. And when that happens, extinction becomes a story we tell ourselves to explain a lack of answers. The fossil record, then, is not a graveyard with neat rows and final dates. It is a broken mirror, reflecting parts of life while concealing others. It records moments, not continuities. It preserves accidents, not intentions. Every conclusion drawn from it carries uncertainty, not as a flaw, but as an inherent condition. This does not mean extinction is rare or exaggerated. Most species that have ever lived are, without question, gone. But it does mean that the boundary between extinction and survival is often blurred, especially at the margins of knowledge. Some animals do not vanish in fire or flood. They fade. They slip into ecological shadows, into places where evidence is thin and time is unkind to memory. They survive not as dominant forces, but as remnants, reduced, altered, enduring against expectations. Their persistence challenges the idea that extinction is always a clean break. Instead, it suggests something more unsettling, that extinction, at least in some cases, is not a single event, but a long, uncertain process. Few discoveries illustrate this better than the coelacanth. For decades, the coelacanth was considered a textbook example of extinction. Fossils showed it thriving hundreds of millions of years ago, long before dinosaurs dominated the land. Then, abruptly, the fossil record went silent. By the end of the Cretaceous, coelacanth fossils vanished entirely. paleontologists confidently declared the species extinct. Then, in 1938, a strange blue fish was hauled up by fishermen off the coast of South Africa. When scientists examined it, they realized something impossible had happened. The coelacanth was alive. This was not a newly evolved species. Its anatomy matched fossil specimens thought to be lost for over 66 million years. Lobed fins with internal bones, primitive joints, and ancient traits placed it firmly among lineages believed to have vanished alongside the dinosaurs. The discovery sent shockwaves through paleontology. If a large, distinctive vertebrate could survive unseen for tens of millions of years, how reliable were extinction declarations based purely on fossil absence? The coelacanth did more than embarrass science. It permanently altered how paleontologists think about extinction. It became the most famous example of what are now called Lazarus taxa, organisms that disappear from the fossil record only to reappear later, either as fossils or as living species. These species don't necessarily go extinct. Instead, they retreat into environments where fossilization is unlikely. Deep oceans, isolated refuges, small, fragmented populations living far from sedimentary deposits. The fossil record tracks preservation, not survival. And preservation is biased. Horseshoe crabs, cycads, and ginkgo trees were once thought to be remnants of extinct lineages. Fossils suggested they had disappeared. In reality, they persisted quietly, surviving mass extinctions that wiped out far more dominant species. Lazarus taxa reveal a harsh truth. The fossil record does not show us everything that lived. It shows us only what happened to be preserved. It was a large terrestrial mammal, well documented, photographed, filmed, and described. And yet, its disappearance did not bring certainty, only questions. For decades after its declared extinction, reports continued to surface. Sightings from remote regions of Tasmania, paw prints that did not match known species, motion blur photographs and fleeting silhouettes that resisted confirmation. None of these pieces of evidence were definitive, but neither were they easily dismissed. What made the thylacine different was not belief, but plausibility. Tasmania contains vast tracts of rugged wilderness, much of it sparsely inhabited even today. Dense forests, mountainous terrain, and limited human presence create conditions where a small, elusive population could, in theory, persist unnoticed. The thylacine was already rare when humans last documented it. If a few individuals survived beyond 1936, their absence from the record would not be surprising. It would be expected. This places the thylacine in an uncomfortable category. It is officially extinct, yet biologically unresolved. No confirmed specimen has been found. No clear genetic evidence has surfaced. But the lack of proof cuts both ways. The same absence that prevents confirmation also prevents absolute dismissal. As with many suspected survivors, the evidence gap itself becomes the story. And the thylacine is not alone. Across the world, similar cases exist. Species declared extinct based on limited surveys, incomplete records, or assumptions about habitat loss. In some instances, those assumptions later prove false. Forests regrow, ecosystems adapt, animals shift behavior. Survival continues quietly, outside the expectations of observers. These cases reveal a deeper truth about extinction science. It is not only constrained by biology, but by human reach. We know what we can access. We protect what we can monitor. We declare extinction where observation ends. In environments that resist exploration, deep oceans, remote jungles, isolated islands, certainty erodes quickly. The less we see, the more tentative our conclusions must be. This does not mean that every extinct species survives in hiding. Most do not. But it does mean that extinction exists on a spectrum of confidence. Some losses are undeniable, supported by overwhelming evidence. Others sit at the margins, unresolved not because of belief or myth, but because proof has never fully materialized. In these gray zones, extinction becomes provisional, a statement of probability rather than fact. As exploration technology improves, some of these uncertainties may resolve. New surveys may confirm absence, or they may uncover survivors that rewrite accepted timelines. History suggests both outcomes are possible. What matters is not the hope of resurrection, but the humility of interpretation. The fossil record, historical documentation, and modern surveys together form an incomplete picture. They tell us much, but never everything. When extinction is declared, it reflects the limits of what we know at that moment in time. And sometimes, those limits are mistaken for endings. In the shadows of deep oceans, dense forests, and forgotten landscapes, the boundary between extinct and unseen remains fragile. It is there, in those spaces, that the idea of extinction loses its certainty and becomes a question rather than a conclusion. Thousands of eyewitness sightings followed its declared extinction. Farmers, hikers, park rangers, and wildlife officers reported striped, dog-like animals well into the late 20th century. Some sightings were dismissed. Others came from trained observers. No body was ever recovered. No bones, no carcasses. From a paleontological perspective, this places the thylacine in a gray zone, presumed extinct but never confirmed by physical evidence. Its extinction is accepted statistically, not conclusively. This is extinction without a body, and it is not unique. The fossil record is full of gaps. Entire periods of time lack fossils not because animals were absent, but because the conditions necessary for fossilization were missing. Tropical forests, mountain regions, and islands are especially poor at preserving remains. When environments change, when forests retreat or sediments stop forming, fossil records can abruptly end. Species appear to vanish, not because they died out, but because their remains stopped fossilizing. To paleontologists, this creates the illusion of extinction. Absence does not equal disappearance. Nowhere is this more evident than in Ice Age extinctions. In several cases, animals pronounced lost were later found alive, not as fossils, but as breathing populations that had simply slipped beyond human notice. These rediscoveries are rare, but they are real, and they expose the limits of certainty in extinction science. Sometimes the error comes from incomplete exploration. Dense rainforests, remote mountain ranges, deep oceans, and politically inaccessible regions can hide species for decades. In other cases, the mistake lies in assumptions that an animal could not survive without a certain habitat, prey, or climate, only for reality to prove otherwise. Even when no living individuals are found, the evidence often refuses to settle. Fragmentary bones appear in unexpected layers. Genetic markers persist in related species. Oral histories describe animals that do not neatly match known survivors. Each clue alone is inconclusive, but together, they complicate the finality of extinction. What emerges is a pattern. Extinction is rarely synchronized across an entire species. Populations disappear at different times, in different places, under different pressures. One group may collapse quickly while another endures for millennia in isolation. From a human perspective, these scattered survivals can be easy to miss, especially when they occur at the edge of the world. This means that the last individual of a species is almost never witnessed. Instead, extinction is reconstructed backward, inferred from absence rather than observed in real time. The end becomes a moving target, dependent on discovery, preservation, and interpretation. In deep time, this uncertainty grows even larger. The farther back we look, the more gaps widen between fossils, and the more tempting it becomes to draw hard lines where none may exist. A species disappears from one region's record, but that silence may reflect erosion, sampling bias, or sheer bad luck. Another fossil, found decades later in a different formation, can reopen a chapter once thought closed. Each such case forces a re-evaluation of how extinction is understood, not as a sharp boundary, but as a fading signal. Some species likely hovered on the brink for tens of thousands of years, neither thriving nor gone. Their numbers dwindled, their ranges shrank, their genetic diversity eroded. By the time they truly vanished, they had already become ghosts in their own ecosystems, And in that sense, extinction leaves echoes. Not all of them are biological. Some persist in the landscape through altered ecosystems, missing functions, or unexpected imbalances. Others persist in human memory, in myths, reports, and unanswered questions that refuse to align neatly with the fossil record. Taken together, these patterns suggest a sobering reality. Extinction is not always a moment marked by catastrophe and finality. Often, it is a long unraveling, one that unfolds unevenly across space and time, leaving behind uncertainty rather than closure. And that uncertainty is where some animals, at least in theory, continue to exist. Not fully alive in the record, but not entirely gone either. The coelacanth is not alone. Birds, insects, reptiles, and mammals declared extinct have been rediscovered alive after decades, sometimes centuries, without confirmed sightings. These rediscoveries expose a critical truth. Extinction declarations are limited by human observation. If a species lives in inaccessible terrain, avoids humans, or exists in extremely low numbers, it can persist unseen for generations. In paleontology, rediscovery is not an anomaly. It is a warning. The animals that resist extinction share striking traits. They often occupy stable ecological niches. They tend to have slow metabolisms, low energy demands, and flexible diets. Many live in environments with little competition. They are rarely dominant predators. Instead, they survive by remaining unnoticed. The fossil record shows that resilience often matters more than strength. The species most likely to persist are not the ones that dominate ecosystems, but the ones that quietly endure. Modern genetics has further complicated extinction. DNA recovered from permafrost, sediments, and subfossil remains allows scientists to study extinct animals long after their bodies disappear. Genetic material can survive far longer than bones. This raises uncomfortable questions. If a species exists genetically, is it truly gone? While de-extinction remains controversial, the ability to reconstruct genomes blurs the line between extinction and absence. Extinction is no longer just a paleontological concept. It has become biological, technological, and ethical. Because of this history, scientists today are far more cautious when declaring extinction. Many species are labeled possibly extinct rather than confirmed gone. This caution exists because certainty has repeatedly proven dangerous. Paleontology has learned humility. Extinction is now treated as a hypothesis, one that must withstand time, evidence, and continued investigation. There is also a human side to extinction. Declaring extinction gives closure. It allows us to draw a line under loss. But animals that refuse to stay extinct deny us that comfort. They exist in uncertainty, forcing us to confront the limits of our knowledge. In that sense, extinction is not just a scientific concept, it is a psychological one. The fossil record is fragmented. The planet is vast. Exploration is incomplete. Because of this, extinction is not always final, at least not in the way we imagine. Some species vanish only to reappear. Others linger unseen, surviving quietly beyond human awareness. The animals that refuse to stay extinct remind us of a humbling truth. Paleontology is not about certainty, it is about interpretation. And as long as Earth remains wild and unexplored, extinction will never be the final word. Some animals don't disappear. They simply wait.